Reading for Pleasure, and it's in partnership with ClassTag and Teacher Monster. So what we're going to do is kick things off in a minute, but before we begin, we'd love to know where you teach, where you're from, how school's looking for you so far this year, and then we're going to jump in with Angela. So Angela, if you can start us off by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about your background and your role with Teacher Monster.
Sure, yeah, lovely to meet you. Thanks for asking me along today. So Teacher Monster is run by the Usborne Foundation. So the Usborne Foundation is a charity associated with the Usborne Foundation, the Usborne publishers. And I've worked with them since 2011, and their aim is to develop children's literacies through innovative use of media and games. And it's been really exciting because I've actually been with them right from the start when we first started making these games. My role in the team is as the educational consultant. So what that means is that I'm responsible for making sure that all of our products are underpinned by current research and are informed by sound pedagogical principles. My other role is I am a senior lecturer in English education at the University of Roehampton. And my research focuses on the relationship between games and learning. And, you know, it's well accepted. We all learn through play. And in my particular research area looks at that relationship between play and literacies. I look not just at the skills of learning, but about developing children's cultural understanding and critical awareness of the world. So I'm going to weave in some of that to our discussion today, because I know our focus today is reading for pleasure, and I'm really excited about finding out what your audience is interested in.
Yeah, that's a very impressive background. We're very excited and very proud to have you on today. Wondering if we can jump in a little bit about that reading for pleasure. So, you know, why is this something that we should be concerned about? Like, we think reading isn't all reading pleasurable. Why is it so important to foster this sense of reading for pleasure?
Okay, so unfortunately, reading isn't always pleasurable for children. Especially, you know, if in schools, you know, testing of reading can loom large in the minds for some children. I mean, it's obviously really important that teachers understand, you know, how to bring children forward, and assessment is really important in that. But for some children, they can find that quite stressful, and they can also begin to associate reading with school tasks rather than something that enriches their lives. You know, it can lose that joy that we want to foster in them. And you know, that joy is really important for four reasons, really. Four reasons I'd like to talk with you about today. So one of them is about, there's not much good having the skill if you don't then have the will. You know, you can have all the skills of reading, but if you don't want to pick up that book and you don't want to dive in and read as part of your everyday life, you know, that's really important to have both, that you have the will and the skill to read every day. The second is about, you know, achievement. That there has been, you know, that there's international evidence to support the fact that if children read for pleasure over time, they will be more successful in their school career and achieve well across a broad range of subjects. So that's really, really key, and there's been lots of research to show that. But of course, you know, there is that link there that reading for pleasure has this knock-on effect. But we don't just want to focus on the attainment of children, of course, because as I said earlier, it's about the cultural understanding that reading can bring. You know, that when you pick up a book, it's like a doorway into another life. You know, you live vicariously through stories. You develop empathy. You see different perspectives. And even with non-fiction, you know, non-fiction, you can investigate the world around you. You can learn so much more through that. So it is about developing that understanding, and also your identity as a reader. So if you are, you know, if you identify as a reader, you don't just see reading as being a school task. you see yourself as a reader in the broadest sense and value all the different things that you do as a reader. You might read a fan site, you might be really interested in comics, you might read a newspaper to find out soccer scores. Those are all legitimate, exciting parts of being a reader. So I think it's, all of those things really, that we kind of bear in mind as teachers when we're trying to sort of spark that joy.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And the question really comes is, so I was a former teacher, and I am a former teacher, and you always have those students that are just super keen and super keen to jump into a book, and then you have others that are reluctant. So how do you really help schools go about developing reading for pleasure?
Yes, so absolutely, yeah. You want every child in your class, to build up that identity of being a reader, and we all start at different points. We all have different things that we enjoy reading. And to answer your question, I'd like to draw on some research that was undertaken at in the UK. It was undertaken by the Open University and the UK Literacy Association. And they undertook research to investigate just that. What would like a reading for pleasure pedagogy look like? What does it look like when teachers do this well in schools? And the research had two phases. So the first phase, they wanted to find out about teachers, the teachers' starting points. So they interviewed, I think it was 1,200 teachers across 11 areas of the country, and they did a survey and found out about what teachers were already doing. And then in the second phase, they worked with 27 schools, and they went in and worked alongside teachers to develop practice, explore practice in 6 areas in London. So I'm going to draw on some of that, because all of that research and all of that work they did, that they started to develop this reading for pleasure pedagogy, where they outlined four areas.
Okay.
So first, it was about social communities. So it's about this social reading environments. Secondly, it's about informal book talk, so developing that, independent reading, and reading aloud. So I can elaborate on some of those perhaps and give some examples. Okay, so with social reading environments, one of the things that they looked at was that they wanted to investigate how to build communities of readers, that we're not just all on our own reading our own books. This is a social dynamic process of being a reader. So it's about developing spaces, inviting spaces where children want to be, but also finding time for children to use them. So I'd like to give an example of that. It's actually from the website that they've developed. It's a case study from a teacher, and what she did is she was actually responsible for the Forest School. I don't know if you have something similar in the US, but the Forest School is where you'd get out and about into the woods and you take your learning outside. Okay, and she took her whole class outside and invited them to build dens out in the woods. Cool. And to find space, it was called, I think she called it the Reading Adventurers, I think was the name. So she took them all out, and they got sticks and rugs and built dark spaces, and all got really excited about making these spaces outside. And initially, she was wondering, would they spend time, would they just be building dens, or would they create a reading space and settle down? And what she found is that over the first, few sessions, there was a lot of kind of movement, lots of busyness building these spaces, a lot of movement between them. Not a lot of reading taking place initially, but she held back. She resisted, intervening, just let it unfold. And actually, as the program, as this club that she was developing went on, those children did find their favourite spaces to be, and she found that it wasn't just about the space, it was with whom they were with. Who were they wanting to read with? So they'd be in groups, some would be on their own. And I think one of the most important things is that children had autonomy, had creative freedom about how they created those spaces. And, and that's really exciting, being outside, but you can do it in the classroom too. You can have a space which children, populate with their favorite books. It has cushions and those places that you want to read.
Yeah. And I love the idea of giving children the option of, to input and create that space. and define what is helpful for them or who they like to read with. That's powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this idea of, social reading environments, it is about space, about coming together, that actually reading sometimes, I was a teacher as well, like you, for many years. And, I used to run a comic club. And again, it was children who wouldn't necessarily be picking up novels as their favourite thing to read. But once you had a load of comics and magazines in front, they came in at lunchtime and read them. And, they weren't sitting on their own at a desk reading them. They were on the floor. They were spread out. They were, poring over. They were pointing at things. And, this was a social event for them, and that they really enjoyed. I think that's really important. But it's not just about the children's, community. It's also about the broader school community, right? So you've got to, you need to be engaging with parents and carers and the community more broadly. And there's lots of ways that, schools can do that. One of the ways is, and I know that your class tag, you support that development of trying to build connections with the school community. But, doing events, social events where there's music, storytelling, food, bringing people in together and building up working groups with teachers. It's all really important so that, children see the community coming into their classroom as well and reading with them. So all of these could talk for a long time.
Yeah, no, I love that. My former school had a reading afternoon. We would not do anything else but read, and the students could bring in blankets and pillows and pajamas, whatever was comfortable, a stack of books, and it made it really special.
Yeah, it's so important. And I think, that comes with the second thing as well, which was came out of OU research, which was informal book talk and being inside books. And, in those moments, I'm sure, you were finding moments to talk to those children about the books and what they were reading. And that's something in schools that's so important, that you need to be a teacher who talks about books, a teacher who reads and a reader who teaches, kind of needing to show that, I'm reading this great novel, or, this is my favorite magazine, whatever it might be, that you're sharing that with children. And the other thing about supporting talk is, that it's not all about a task. Like I said earlier, it's not all about, having to get some writing done at the end of having read a book. Sometimes it's about opening up talk. And I train teachers as well as doing research. I train teachers at the University of Roehampton. And one of the things we share with them is some research by Aidan Chambers. And it's a really simple technique, which means opening book talk with the word, tell me. Tell me what you thought. And he has these 4 areas that really, really open things up. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like. That's really important too. Tell me something that was puzzling, something you found confusing, something that raised questions, and tell me something that it connects within your outside life. So it's thinking about how books, like they open up windows into other worlds, but they also help you connect with your own experiences as well and bring those to the books. And I used to do this at school when I was a teacher. I had Postit Notes as I was reading, if I was reading aloud. And children would just jot things down that came to mind, and we'd put them up on the board around, and it became a really sort of dynamic process. And I know, lots of teachers have tried that.
And helpful to our parents as well, as so many parents now are taking on the burden of, doing things that have been done traditionally in school. So they're offering extra support with reading and whatnot. So these are great questions for families to be asking their kids.
Yeah, absolutely. And they really surprise you. I mean, that's what I really love about it, is that you ask these questions, there are these connections, and they make connections that you wouldn't have dreamt of, and it's really exciting, I think, to have these conversations with children. So, but I think, it is exciting talking with children because they open up your awareness of the world and the connections they're making. But the other thing about, making recommendations, children recommending books to each other and things, that as teachers, we need to keep ourselves, aware of all the books that are being published at the moment, and be readers of children's books as well, kind of be open to reading all sorts of texts, not just ones that we were familiar with as children ourselves, because then we're better equipped to hand that book, the right book, to a child at the right moment, or a comic or whatever it might be, to spark them on.
So Can you also tell us a little bit about how specifically your organization with Teach Your Monster is supporting teachers in this area? How, specifically regarding reading for pleasure?
Yes, absolutely. So if I say a little bit about Teach Your Monster, as you know, so some of your audience may already know that we have been creating games, Teach Your Monster games, for a number of years now, to support children to develop reading, their reading at the early stages of reading. And our initial games focused on phonics.
Mm-hmm.
So phonics, supporting children to make the links between the letters, the symbols, and those sounds, and develop the skills needed to blend through a word. And they've been really successful. We've been delighted. I mean, they're played globally now. I think the last figure I heard was that they were played 200 million times by 20 million players. I mean, it's so exciting. It's amazing, that people are finding this so useful. But we've always, as a company, we always have known and have always come from the starting point, but that reading is not just about skills, it is about the pleasure and about enjoyment. And we wanted to make a product that was specially designed to support children to read for fun. And in fact, that's the name of our new product. It's called Reading for Fun.
Amazing.
And just to give a little bit of context for those who may never have played the games, the whole principle really behind it is that the children have their very own very cute little monster which they teach to read. And the children in that sense aren't being taught to read by the product, by the game. The children are taking ownership over their learning and teaching their little monster everywhere. And that's a very sort of powerful dynamic to have in learning. So they once they have this little monster, they enter this imaginary world. They enter this little village filled with other friends and other characters that they can meet and engage with as they're going on their reading adventures. And when we were working on this product, making sure that it was underpinned by reading for pleasure pedagogy and sound reading pedagogy, and drawing on my own research into games and learning and plays and literacy, we came up with an acronym which is very British, the TEACUP. And I don't know if it'd be useful maybe to just sort of talk through what each of those stands for now. I think we might have sent you some slides just to give you a little sneak peek at our beta. So these are the beta screenshots of the game, and we can see here you've got teacups along the side. Mm-hmm. So the letter T in teacups stands for trying new things. And at the centre of the village, when the children play the game, there is this library. And the library is filled with all sorts of text. You've got poetry, non-fiction, stories, joke books, like a real range. And not only that, it has a very knowledgeable and friendly librarian. You can see that in the middle, that person in the middle there, called Breakspear. And the librarian is always there to support you in recommend new books to you. So, for example, if you visited a few days in a row and you were reading lots and lots of non-fiction about space, the librarian will say, oh, I see you've really enjoyed these books about space. Would you like to read this story about a dog that goes to the moon, or whatever it might be? So just trying to encourage, recognizing where children are starting from, understanding their choices and that they're developing a preference perhaps, and then encouraging them to try new things and to branch out. So that's what that's all about, trying new things. And all these ebooks are completely free, and what the children can do is, if they do like a book, they can take it home to their own little virtual house and develop their own bookshelf. So that's T for trying new things. So E is about enjoyment. Which is what it's all about. So, enjoying reading. We want children to enjoy the process of reading throughout the game. There are so many opportunities. This is a map of all the places you can go. So we've got the library there in the middle. We've got a post office, a bakery, friends' houses, Parker's house, Scout's house, all these different places you can go. And what I didn't raise earlier, one of the points about reading for pleasure is that it has to be about choice. It's not just about what you're told to read. It's about making active choices. And here you can see from this map, where do you want to go? anywhere you go, there's going to be reading opportunities, going to be lots of reading adventures. So, it really is about that, that quest that the children engage with their monster. Okay, so then A is about achievement. So A stands for achievement. And as I spoke about earlier, it can stand for sort of academic achievement. We know there's this link between reading for pleasure and children's academic achievement over time. But this is more than that. This is about reading achievement in the fullest sense. That actually, when I'm a reader and when I'm enjoying reading, I'm achieving things in this world. I can deliver books, I can deliver posts, I can, make food, I can work at the bakery because I'm reading these recipe books. And so, at every stage, this is a sort of affirmation of your identity as a reader, really. That's what this is all about, that you can choose to take part in all these different activities. So the C then, in teacups, stands for community. And I spoke earlier about the Open University research into building communities of readers, and this is it's really a sort of a simulation of that, in that you can choose who you want to read with. So there's lots of different characters in the world that you can pick up a book and read with, whether that's around a campfire, whether it's in the library, sitting around with the librarian, whatever it might be, but you're choosing to read with others. And what I like about this sort of screenshot here is they're actually reading a magazine. This is the Okie magazine. Mm-hmm. And it's, let's pretend we're wolves running in the wild, woo! And we've got the character that you're reading with there, sort of joining in, woo! And the characters actually ask questions, much in the same way. It sort of models this book talk that you might engage with in a school setting. So they might say, I wonder what's going to happen next, or I don't like the look of that character, or this is really exciting, or whatever it might be. There are these kind of responses, these social responses to your reading. And in testing, it's really interesting because we do test regularly with schools and with children, and children are reading this aloud. They're reading to the page, reading aloud to those characters on the screen. So, which is real, joy to watch when we've seen that in testing. So that's about community. If we go to U. Okay. Now this is good. This is about understanding the purposes of text. And do you remember on the notice board it had all the different jobs? If you'd selected bakery, this is where you'd end up. And we've got the character here. So this is might be your monster here, behind the counter, and you have all the villagers coming to your bakery for the day. This one's asking, "Hello, monster. Can I have a rock bun, please?" To achieve this, you've got to open up the book, that little blue book that's on the side, which is filled with recipes. Find the right recipe, open it up, read it, follow the instructions, and create the cake. And you can get creative with it. You don't have to follow the recipe to the T. You can get creative. The characters don't mind getting a surprise if it doesn't go to plan. It's a very sort of positive, experience of cooking. And we felt this was really important in the game, that we had a range of text, but it's not just about stories, that you can read. I have lots of, friends who read recipes for pleasure. They sit there kind of thinking, what am I going to do at the weekend? What could I make? And there is this process of reading for pleasure, but also reading for purpose. So that's you. That's understanding the purpose of text. For the letter P, this here gets to the heart of preferences, about choice and preferences, and that children need ownership about what they read. It's not just about reading what you are told. So here we've got the librarian saying, what should we read, monster? And there's a selection of three texts that have come up, and you make choices as you go along. And what we've tried to do in the game, and as the game develops, we're trying to develop it so that it's sensitive and understands the preferences that children are developing as they go through the game. But also with an eye to moving, children into new areas as well, suggesting something they might enjoy. And as I said earlier about preferences, this is really important in terms of identity as a reader, because, if I really like a book, I can take it home and I can start to build up my bookshelf at home. All of these free ebooks can start to fill up my bookshelf at home. And, that's a very powerful thing as well, for children to have their own collection that's curated by them, chosen by them, that they can share with friends and family. So, you know, we're really pleased with how that's developing at the moment. And this is the last one is for we've had lots of discussion. That. But it can also mean that you're developing your stamina in terms of your habit of reading, that you want to read every day, that you're going back to books or to comics or whatever it is you're choosing to read every day. So it becomes a kind of lifelong love of reading. Is, you know, basically the end goal, isn't it, that we hope to develop in all our children. But it can also be developing stamina in terms of series. You know, we know that children you know, can really get hooked on a series of books. You know, whether it's Diary of a Wimpy Kid or whatever it might be that you are reading. The next one you want to move on further and further into the series, and that can also be a form of stamina. So it can mean many things, but we've illustrated it here just to show you sort of a bookshelf, and there's a few texts here that are sort of indicative of some of the texts in the game, but of course there are lots more, and we're trying to add to it all the time. So those are the kind of main key elements of the reading for pleasure pedagogy. Mm-hmm. And in terms of next steps, really, this is a beta at the moment. It's a beta stage, and we are making this available as all our games are free on a PC. All you have to do is choose it from a drop-down menu. And we are really hoping that your audience, the teachers in the US, will just have a go at the pilots that we've put out there. It's very much in development. We want to hear feedback. We want to hear suggestions so that we can continue to develop it based on feedback that we receive from practicing professionals. That's so important to everything we do. We're always talking with teachers, talking with parents, finding out what works, what's not working, what they'd like to see more of. So, if your teachers, would like to have a go at that and get in touch, we'd love to hear from them.
Yeah, this is an incredible resource. I can't believe, this is freely accessible to folks around the world. Thank you for being part of that and making it possible. I think the beta version looks incredible, and can't wait for the official launch as well.
Eventually it will be available on the App Store, and although it is on the App Store, it's a paid app. We make it free twice a year for schools, so that they can get it on there. Schools are on a tight budget, so we make it freely available. The app will be available twice a year, so you can get it on your bank of tablets. Sometimes that's easier, isn't it?
Thank you. And thank you so much for sharing with us today, Angela. You reminded me of some things that I need to do in my personal life, and just, that modeling of reading for pleasure. We get so busy, and it's important to pause and say, okay, I need to get some books for myself and share that out with the world and share with friends with what I'm reading. And I think that's really important. I do read a lot, I should add, but I could do more in sharing what I'm reading with others.
Absolutely. And I think that's it. I think, that's one of the things that, as all teachers are trying to do. We're trying to make links with our own private practices and our pedagogical practices. And sometimes, it's in busy lives, they can become quite separate sometimes. We don't think, so when we're thinking about how do we support children to read independently, think, well, what do I do when I read for pleasure on my own? Am I sitting at a desk, or like you were saying when you were a teacher, do I want to be on a cushion, or do I want to be in a den, or do I read in the garden, out and about? Do I read with others? So it's making those connections. I think is really important.
Yep, absolutely. And then building that community, so you have recommendations with something else that you highlighted. I think that's really important. I have a friend who regularly puts on her Facebook posts, what book should I read, and sends it out. And I haven't done that, but I read all the recommendations that she's getting, and I pick from that list. So
absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I love audiobooks. I like audiobooks, but I also love hearing books read aloud. And I think that's something that I didn't quite have time to touch on earlier, which is this this reading aloud kind of aspect. You were saying about, you become part of a community and recommendations. And I think some of the best schools that do this really successfully, it isn't about we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then we're going to be reading for pleasure. It is a school journey. And it's a journey of professional development, teachers reflecting on their own practice. It's a whole school approach. And like you were saying, you're reading these recommendations. And if children get the chance to hear this in assemblies, children saying about what they've read in assembly, really gives it profile. Teachers reading aloud is really important. It enables children to get into stories in a way that they maybe, if they're at early stages of reading, it gives them access to text they couldn't read on their own, and, to develop that real enjoyment. But I had read a really interesting case study by a teacher who asked the question, who runs reading aloud in our classroom? Mm-hmm. We had this sign-up sheet in the classroom where children would go up and write their name down and say what they wanted to read aloud, what it was going to be, and the teacher would read aloud and model this, characterization and expression and all of those things. But then a child would come and do the same thing, and it's about that side of it. Awesome. All of these things that I've been talking about, they are actually available on a website which is linked to the OU. We could put it out on your Facebook page as well. So it's www.readingrichpedagogies.org, and it's full of teacher. What's really nice about it, it's got lots and lots of teacher case studies. I think I've got one here. They look much better than in colour. I've got it in black and white, but they're written by teachers, all about things that have worked, all underpinned by the research. So that's might be interesting to some of you.
Okay. We'll share that in the chat as well. And actually, we didn't get to all the questions in the chat today, but what we'll do is we'll monitor them for the next 24 hours, and we'll definitely check in, and Angela or myself will respond to those questions as they come up. Angela, it's been a pleasure having you. I'm so excited for the launch, and it's going to be a helpful resource for millions and millions of young people around the world. So thank you so much for everything.
And thanks very much for your time. Okay, thank you.